This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
My mother had kidney disease, and years ago, I had gotten tested to be a donor. And my mother's friend had told me this recently, that when I was going through all the testing, that she had mentioned that she was nervous that there would be something that would come back that would make me question, wait a minute, why is my blood type this? Or why is, but I was a perfect match for her. So she got out.
Imagine spitting into a tube, sending off your DNA, and unknowingly turning your life upside down. For me and thousands of others, this is our reality. I'm your host, Alexis Auerselt. In July of 2021, I discovered that I am an NPE, someone who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. This podcast shares the journeys of people who were shocked by a DNA discovery, mostly through modern DNA testing. We're telling the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. This is DNA Surprises. When I spoke to Kristin late last year, her NPE was relatively new. In this episode, she discusses how she's navigating her recent discovery. She shares the challenges of not being able to talk to her mother, who recently passed, and hesitations she has about connecting with her newfound family. Thank you for sharing your story, Kristin.
My name is Kristin, and I am 49, and I am from Rochester, New York. So I, back in, I think, 2012, I went on Ancestry just to start messing with building a family tree. Did that on and off over the years, but I've always wondered more about my ethnicity and, just wanted to just do the family tree. And, I knew one day I wanted to do the DNA. I don't remember what year that came out, but I just know that I wanted to do it at some point. And my mother knew that. Fast forward to this year, my mother passed away in January, and I don't know what made me decide to do the DNA this year, but I did. Got my results in July, and me and my husband were out in the garage. It was a Friday night. I remember it like it happened literally 5 minutes ago. It's very vivid in my mind. And 5 people came up as matches. 2, it just said very close matches, and 3 said they were first cousins. And I was like, I know all my first cousins, but I don't know who these people are. But these 5 people all had the same last name, and I recognized the last name. And my mother had a friend with that last name that I heard her speak about over the years. I had never met him or anything. Maybe I did. I don't know. So anyways, my husband, it's kind of funny because my husband was looking at me, and I'm just kind of funny. And I'm looking at him going, wait a minute. I'm like, oh my God, my mother had a friend named blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, and I go, you're right. I'm thinking too much into this. But I'm like, but who are these people? So immediately I went inside and called my dad, because even though my parents had been divorced since I was little, growing up, my dad owned like a bar restaurant business, and my mom worked for him growing up. And they, whoever he knew, she knew, and vice versa. So I'm like, well, I'm going to ask my dad if he knows who this guy is. My dad didn't answer. So then I proceeded to call one of my mother's best friends, who she's known since she was really little. And I just came right out and said, is so-and-so my father? And there was a big break in silence. And she goes, "Oh boy." And I was like, "What do you mean, oh boy?" She goes, "I've got some things to tell you." So apparently back when my parents were married, my father actually, unfortunately, was an alcoholic, the man who I thought was my father.
Mm-hmm.
And he was married 4 times. He cheated on, I think, every wife he's had, treated my mother pretty poorly. I obviously don't remember any of it. I was very young when they got divorced. But, I'd heard stories over the years. So my mom's friend told me that my mother had an affair on my father because she had found out he cheated. And she wanted to do it to get back at him, even though she never told him she cheated. So she actually wasn't sure who my father was. But I guess it was a strong indication that the other man was, because I guess I looked a lot like him when I was younger. But my mother just, carried it on that way. But she never told my dad. I don't know about my biological father because unfortunately he's not alive anymore.
Yeah. Did you have any suspicion growing up that?
No, not at all. In fact, so my dad has 4 children from 3 marriages. He had my older brother from his first marriage and then married my mother and had what I thought was me and my brother, my younger brother. And then his third wife and him also had another child. So now come to find out those 2 brothers who I thought were my half brothers are not even biological, which I don't know about you, but nothing's changed for me. I mean, I grew up with, my dad's still my dad. My brothers are still my brothers.
Right.
But it's just in my mind, though, it's very weird.
It's a shift. Yeah.
I can't even describe it. So needless to say, that whole weekend, I cried the whole weekend. I just thought it was just so surreal and just messed up. And even to this day, I still can't sometimes wrap my head around it. So I started to investigate a little bit, look people up on Facebook and talk. And I come to find out 2 of my mother's other friends knew about this man possibly being my father. And they had told me that my mother had wanted to tell me or contemplated over the years, but she didn't know what to do because in her mind, she didn't know how I would react, number 1. Number 2, he was already deceased. So she was like, well, what if I tell her this and he's not her father? And I put her through all that, so she didn't know what to do, which I guess I get in a way, but in a way I'm just like, I just wish she had told me because I have so many questions and that will never get answered.
Yeah.
So I have reached out. I reached out to an uncle that I found, and I just recently met an uncle and 2 cousins about 3 weeks ago. It went very well. I have 12 first cousins on that side. My biological father was one of 7 children. All of them are deceased except for the one uncle that I met. So my dad, who I grew up thinking was my dad, got sober probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And we've actually had a relationship. He's been very supportive since my mother died. We've finally have developed a relationship at, he's 75 and I'm 49. And it will never be like what I had hoped growing up, but I have a relationship with him, so I'm happy with that. And like I said, finding this out doesn't change how I feel about my dad or my half, who I thought were my half brothers. Oh, I also found out that I have a half brother from my biological father. Unfortunately, though, he's in prison in Florida for the next 10 years. I've debated sending him a letter. See, the unfortunate thing is my dad and my 3 brothers are all actually, one of my brothers passed away 6 years ago from alcoholism. All of my brothers and my dad were alcoholics and drug addicts. And then I find out that this half brother is in prison for drugs. So there was a disappointment,
Right.
because I thought, oh my gosh, I have another sibling. And then to find out that he's also been in trouble with the law and, with drugs is just, and I don't want to, I know it's a disease. Believe me, I've grown up with it. I know all about it. And, but it's disappointing. But anyways, I've thought about writing him a letter, which I might do eventually. I just don't know what to do.
Yeah. What's your thought? I mean, would you like to have a relationship with him?
Yes, part of me does, but part of me doesn't know if I want to because I don't know enough about him to know if he's somebody that I could trust down the road, is prison going to make him worse? Or is he going to come out a better person? Is he going to come out, and go back to drugs. There's a lot of factors there. So it's kind of scary because I've grown up in that environment, and there's been a lot of trust issues with my brothers now, and well, not now, but in the past, and my father. And so I don't know what to do, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Well, you're still processing it. You only found out 4 months ago. So do your brothers that you grew up with and your father now know?
So that night, my father wound up calling me back. And it was about 10 o'clock at night. So I couldn't change my story and say, oh, I was just calling to say hi, because I had already talked to him that day. And it was 10 o'clock at night. I don't call him that late just to chat,
Right.
So I was like, Dad, are you sitting down? And he's like, what's the matter? And I just came right out and said it. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to say to him, you're not my father. Sorry, I'm like getting emotional now.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
That was difficult because I didn't know how he would react. And, he's been sober. I didn't know if that would send him back into wanting to drink. There were a lot of things there. And everything happened so quickly that night that I didn't think it through about telling him. It was like, I was more like wanted to know I was more like, what the hell is going on? I need answers now. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. When you get a shock like that, you're just desperate for information because it's a complete, rocks your entire world.
Right. So my dad was very confused because my dad's not very technology savvy. Mm-hmm. So he's like, what do you mean you did DNA? Well, why, he didn't understand why I did it. And I said, well, Dad, a lot of people do it, I said, and it's more for, it's more of a fun thing, well, at least I thought it would be. If anything, I thought that I was going to maybe find some siblings I didn't know about because of my hearing about my dad's infidelity. Never in a million years would I think that I would find out that my dad was not my dad. I mean, that didn't even cross my mind. Not even a little bit, And it's been hard to process, because I feel like, I lost my mother suddenly in January, and then this, so it was like, this was something I did not need. Not right now. It's been, I just feel like with everything going on with COVID, that's turned everybody's lives upside down, in the past, it's been very difficult for everybody. Just the changes that COVID has done to people and jobs and just, all the deaths. And then, I wasn't able to be at the hospital with my mother until she decided she didn't want any more care. And I was able to be with her the last 3 days she was alive. So that was kind of traumatic, and so that was definitely like, now I think, why did I do that? I mean, I can't change it. I can't take it back. I just now wish I didn't do it. Maybe later on, it just wasn't good timing.
Yeah. But ultimately it is the truth. So what was his reaction?
I don't think he knew what to say. I think he was like I said, he was confused at first, but then once I explained everything and why I did it, it was like, I think he didn't want to believe it. But then immediately afterwards, he was like, well, you're my daughter. You'll always be my daughter. And I'm like, well, yeah. I said, Dad, this doesn't change anything for me. It really doesn't. I do not think anything differently. We got off the phone pretty quickly. So that was Friday night. So over the weekend, I think we both were just a mess. You know what I mean? He called me, I think it was Sunday, and he's like, please don't be mad at your mother. He goes, if I hadn't cheated on her and if I wasn't such a lousy husband, she wouldn't have done this. So I was like, wow, hear that come out of my dad's mouth was like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Holy crap. I'm so sorry. I didn't think I'd get this emotional.
Kristin, it's totally okay. I still get emotional too. This happens. It's totally fine. And if you need to pause or anything, it's okay too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And no, it's nice to know. I didn't realize that you also had the same situation. So it's nice talking to somebody that totally gets it.
And that's part of why I started the podcast, was just selfishly so I could talk to other people that were going through the same thing, because you feel so alone. I mean, I'd never even heard of anything like this until it happened to me.
Well, right. And then when I went on that Facebook page, I mean, literally, I feel like every day there's a new person on there saying, well, I just found out my dad wasn't my dad. And I'm like, why are so many women having affairs? Somebody needs to do a study. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's amazing to me how many people are finding out. I'm kind of hurt because, and I don't think it was my mother's friend's place to tell me anything, but to think that 3 people that I knew very well knew. Come to find out, though, I don't think anybody in my family knew. My dad didn't know. I don't have a lot of family left because they've all passed away over the past like 10, 15 years. But I have some other family members, and they didn't know. Oh, my father asked me not to tell my other brothers, which were from his other marriages.
Okay.
Which at first I was really upset about because I thought, well, this is my story. Why can't I tell them? It's not going to change anything for me. But my dad, I understood. So my older brother, he has actually been sober now. He's like 90 something days clean, which is actually really good for him. He's never really gone this long. And my dad's concerned that if he does fall off the wagon, that when he's drunk, when he drinks, he can be very nasty. And he doesn't want him getting very nasty with me or him, which I get. But I think my dad doesn't want me to tell them because my dad is worried about his reputation. Because he's even like, well, who knows? And who are you going to tell? Like, aren't you worried about what people are going to think about your mother? I said, no. I said, because if they know Mom, they know that that's not who she was.
Right.
In fact, I was shocked that my mother cheated. You know what I mean? But once I found out why, I'm really not mad. I'm just mad that she never said anything to me. So I think my father is more worried about what people are going to think of him. You know what I mean? That I'm not his real daughter, and my mother had this affair. And
it's a big responsibility, though, to keep that secret. How are you feeling now about keeping that from your brothers?
It's difficult. Well, my younger brother, he's 30. Oh my God. He was born when I was a senior in high school. So he's in his 30s. Honestly, not telling him is not bothering me. I really, really want to tell my older brother. Because when we were younger, we were close before he got really bad with drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, but I really want to tell him. And he was at my house for Thanksgiving, and it wasn't weird. It's just, I thought a lot about it, that day. And I don't know. And then, like I said, my other brother, he passed away 6 years ago. So obviously I'll never know. But
yeah,
it's just what's eating me apart is not being able to talk to my mother. It's driving me absolutely insane that I can't talk to her about this.
Yeah. What questions do you have for her?
I want to know, like, why she never told me, why she never did anything about it when I was born. Like, because she did suspect the other guy was my father. Like, why did she continue to stay with my dad and have another child? Like, I get it. Like, I know people, she was young. I'm sure, because I do remember her telling me that even before she married my father, she knew that she was making a mistake. So I do know some things, but it's just, I don't know. Stuff like that. And, why she just never told me. Like, I knew this guy's name. I mean, she didn't hang out with him on a regular basis, like, as she got older, but I do remember he had moved to Florida, like, a long time ago. And I remember her talking about a friend that, say his name, he lives in Florida. If he came back here, she'd meet him for dinner, whatever. I never thought anything of it because my mom knew a lot of people. She was one of those people that she had a lot of friends and had no enemies. Like, everybody loved her. So it didn't faze me. She had a lot of guy friends. She had a lot of girlfriends, so it just didn't faze me.
Does your uncle know anything? Your paternal uncle?
So no, they didn't. When I met with them, they actually said that if he had known about me, they're pretty positive that he would have wanted to be in my life, which is kind of weird because to me, I think, well, obviously he had to know my mother got pregnant. I would think. Maybe he didn't. But since they were still friends later on, he had to have known when I was born. Like, and you'd think he would question, like, well, is that my child? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, they swear that they don't know anything about me or didn't know anything about me. And it's funny because one of my mother's friends, so my biological father was a fireman. I guess her brother-in-law and her brother both worked with him years and years ago. And everybody that I've talked to that knew of him, I guess he was very well liked, very well known. I was told by this uncle that he was very family oriented. He was a great father to his son. But this brother-in-law and brother said that they believe too that he had known about me that he definitely would have wanted to be in my life. So that's another thing that's bothering me, because my father growing up was not, because of his alcoholism, he was just not, he wasn't a great dad. He wasn't really around much. There'd be years we wouldn't speak, just because of that reason, the drinking. But so that bothers me to think that my biological father probably would have been a really great dad. You know what I mean? And like, even speaking to my cousin who I met, she said like family Christmases growing up were wonderful. She said there'd be like 50 people there, and come to find out, my mom's parents, where they lived, who I was very close to, lived literally in the track across the street from where my biological parents lived. Which,
Wow.
yeah, and after talking to some of those two cousins, because of Facebook, we wound up having some mutual friends. Like, it's just weird. Like, our paths have definitely crossed in the past. It just blows my mind. Like, where I live is a pretty big city, but yet it's not. You know what I mean? When you think about like all the connections, it's like, wow, we knew a lot of the same people. It's just crazy,
Yeah. There's definitely like a recurring theme that I've heard from other NPEs of the what if, what if I'd known, what would my childhood have been like? Somebody that I spoke with on Sunday, she put it really well. She said that she feels like that part of her life was stolen from her because she'll never know.
That's how I feel. And I feel like my life, like half my life was a lie. And part of me is angry because I think, oh my God, my mother like knew what a crappy father my dad was. Like, it really bothers me, but I sit here also and think, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't bring anybody back. I can't change my past.
Right.
So I'm trying really, really hard to think differently and not dwell on that, even though it's hard some days.
Mm-hmm.
Some days I'm okay with it. Other days, like when I first found out, I was like, at first I was like, you know what? I don't want to meet anybody on that side of the family. I just want to get my medical history. That's all I want. Mm-hmm. Because what I struggle with is, how do I develop a relationship with these people if almost 50 years old that I didn't grow up with? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I struggle with. But I didn't, like I said, I met 3 of them. It went very well. We've actually been invited to Christmas Eve.
Well, that's wonderful.
It is. And I believe we're going to go. I'm very nervous, because I'll be meeting a lot more people. But, I've had a couple people say to me, maybe this is a blessing in a disguise, because I don't have a big family and I've always wished that I did. And now I do.
Yeah, huge.
It's weird, so I don't know. I'm trying. And the days that I can deal with this, I try to see the positives, because I've seen, on that Facebook page, I feel bad for some people because they've been completely rejected by their biological family, or they've, asked their mother like, hey, I did DNA, and their mother treats them like garbage and puts the blame on them. There's some horrible stories I've read. And I think to myself, well, thank God that I'm not going through that. They've been very welcoming. They've been in fact, when we met, they brought me a ton of pictures. They brought me these family trees that they had, written out, and gave me some history of my grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles. And so they've been very, very welcoming. So I'm very lucky and I'm very thankful for that. Another thing I'm having a very hard time with is I have not told my dad that I've met anybody, because he did mention to me once that what goes through his mind is that if my biological father were alive, I'd want to meet him. Mm. I don't know if it would bother him that I'm trying to develop a relationship with that side of the family. And I shouldn't feel guilty, because I didn't do that. I didn't ask for this,
Right. Right.
None of us did. But I guess I just don't want to stir the pot, I guess. So I figure, well, what he doesn't know won't hurt him. And my kids, I have 3 boys, 13, 19, and 27. My 27-year-old has high-functioning autism. I have not told him, because even though he'll kind of understand it, I don't want him saying to my dad, oh, so you're not my grandpa anymore. You know what I mean? But my other 2, I had to tell them, because that weekend I found out I was just a mess. I was crying all weekend. I wanted the boys to know what was going on.
And what was their reaction?
they were, I think, pretty shocked. I forget which, I think it was my 13-year-old said, he goes, so grandpa's not our grandpa? I said, no, he's your grandpa. I'm like, I try and explain to him, no, this doesn't change anything.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
TaxAct knows small business owners can sometimes use a little help with their taxes. That's why TaxAct has Expert Assist, a team of live tax experts ready to answer any questions you may have. Think of them as your own personal sidekick. Not like one of those funny talking animal sidekicks, more like the super smart nerding out on tax code and business casual attire sidekick, but just as helpful and lovable. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
And they seemed okay with that. My dad came for Thanksgiving and nothing was different. Nobody acted differently. It was like nothing had ever happened. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the boys are interested in going. I told them about Christmas Eve and they are interested in going. So I guess that's good.
Now that you've met some of your newfound family members, have you found any connections there? Like, has anything kind of made sense? Things that you had in common, or kind of the hindsight is 2020 sort of thing, where you're like, oh, that's why I was different.
No, not really. It's weird because I have a lot of hobbies. My mother never had any hobbies, nothing. My dad, maybe a few. But my mom's mom, my grandmother, had a lot of hobbies. So I just assumed, I got it from her because she did a lot of things that I do, like sewing and furniture refinishing and, stuff like that. I'm into photography. Like I have a lot of hobbies and not enough time.
Right.
But so I just thought, I got it from my grandmother and some of it from my dad, because my dad was big into gardening. I love to garden. Like my mother didn't do anything. She really just had no hobbies. So, but there was never anything growing up. Like my brothers looked like my dad. I look just like my mother. Like I look in the mirror and I see my mom.
Mm.
So I never questioned anything because I just thought, well, I look like my mom and my brothers look like my dad.
So you were just truly completely blindsided. Completely.
Oh yeah. Blindsided completely. Like it did. Like I still sit here and just go, excuse my French, but I go, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I just, there's no way to even explain this. Like, I had friends calling me for a week or two afterwards, just going, are you okay? Because they were flabbergasted. They just couldn't believe it. Anybody that knew my mother was just, wow. Like, are you serious? Like, it just didn't seem possible. But
Right.
Obviously it is.
I'm so sorry, that your mom passed and that you aren't able to ask her these questions, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Do you feel like you have forgiven her?
No. But I'm not angry where I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say no. It's weird. I'm not a very religious person. I don't know what I believe after you die, but for some reason, ever since this has happened, there's a part of me that in the back of my head, I think someday I will be able to confront her about this.
Mm.
And I don't know why I feel that way. Like it's been there since the day I found out. Like someday I will be able to confront her about this.
Yeah.
Whether there's truth to that, I don't know.
Right.
But it's weird how it's just this feeling I get. I don't know. I don't know whether I want to say it's so hard to explain because I'm still angry at times. I just want answers. I just want to know why she took this to her grave. Why didn't she write a letter? Why didn't she, she knew she was going to die someday,
Right.
Even if she didn't want to face me, leave a letter. I don't know. But what bothers me is to think that she held this in for almost 50 years. To me, that's Wow. Because I couldn't do it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? In a way, I'm just, I don't know. I'm like, I try to think, oh God, what did this do to her? Even though she's the one who chose to deal with it the way she did, it doesn't mean that she dealt with it okay. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that she didn't stress about it. But I guess it bothers me because she knew I wanted to do this DNA. I've been saying it for at least 2 years. I just never did it. And now I'm kicking myself. I'm like, damn it, why didn't I do this a year ago? But I'm also one of those people that I'm like, everything happens for a reason. So there's a reason I didn't do it, I guess, a year ago. I don't know what the reason is. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. But I think that that's such a compassionate view, though, you know, to consider how your mom must have felt, despite the fact that she made that choice, because it probably was really hard to keep that inside.
Well, my brother passed away 6 years ago, and he was 40 when he died, and she found him in his bedroom. He actually had died of a brain bleed because the day before he was so drunk that he fell and hit his head really hard on some concrete. So she found him, and she was never the same after that, which I totally get that. I mean, how do you get through losing a child? So I think, oh my God. So for the past 6 years, you know, she's dealt with that on top of wondering, but I don't know. Then again, you know, these are things I want to ask her. Like, did this eat you alive that you didn't know who my father was? Or did it not? Like, was she able to stuff it? You know, I don't know. At first, I was very angry with my mother. I was like, how dare she? You know, but then I guess I've had more time to process. I've been a little bit more forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, God, I would do anything for her to just come back and just have this conversation. Yeah. And if she were alive, I would react this way. But I can't say that because if she were alive, because we had a love-hate relationship. Mm-hmm. I mean, I loved my mom to death and I miss her like, oh my God, like you wouldn't believe. But honestly, I could see why she'd be afraid to tell me because I could take it one of two ways. I could be like in shock and like let her explain and, you know, just go on and process it, or I could completely have flipped out on her. So I could understand her being afraid because I do have a temper at times. Mm-hmm. But I'm working on it in therapy. And so, yeah, right now, yeah, I could say how I would have handled it, but I honestly don't know if she had told me how I would have handled it. I have no clue. And I think that's what her fear was. She was afraid that I would probably stop talking to her or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to put myself like in her shoes at times, even though I don't think she handled it the right way. But then again, you know, we're all human. We all make mistakes. Like I know I have. And maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly can't say how I'd be if she were alive. I think, you know, I do. I sit here and think about it all the time and think I probably would react way differently and probably would have been way more angry and been like, what the hell? Like, why you had all these times? That's why I'm frustrated that I can't talk to her, I think, because she had several opportunities to tell me. Several opportunities, you know? So that's what I'm struggling with.
Did you give her your kidney?
No, I wound up actually, even though I was a perfect match, the very last test they did on me, they did a kidney biopsy and I wound up I have what's called nephrosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries. So I couldn't donate. So, but she wound up getting one afterward. A friend came forward and gave her one. But,
oh, that's good. That's good. So you kind of touched on therapy. What is helping you at this point in your journey?
I don't think there's anything that's helping me yet. I think it's still too new and still too fresh. Maybe one of the things I could say that's helping me, and actually it's not even the therapy part, is the fact that the people I have met on that side of my family have been very welcoming and very kind and accepting. And I think it's helped that I've seen some of the Facebook stories on that one Facebook page because, like as you've seen too, some of them are just so sad how these people are treated by their parents when they find out. So I think being on that Facebook page helps. I think that they were responsive. That helped. Therapy, it helps to talk about it, but I think talking to you is even better because you get it 100%. Whereas a therapist, my therapist is not in this situation. I mean, they're trained, on how to obviously do therapy, but they can't fully understand what I'm going through.
When I told my therapist, I think she was shocked. I don't think they know.
Oh my God. My therapist, actually, it's a man.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so funny because, we were on Zoom and his mouth, like, I know therapists are not really supposed to show like much reaction. His mouth dropped open and both of his hands went on both sides of his face. Like he grabbed his cheeks, like, what? He goes, I've heard a lot of things. He goes, but this is a first. I'm like, really? I'm like, because it's pretty common according to my Facebook page.
Yeah, I really think there is an untapped market out there. If there are any therapists listening, there's a niche there for people like us.
I know.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. But I think sometimes I tend to deal with it like humor wise too, because if I don't, then I'm just gonna go crazy,
Yeah.
in my head, because I already have really bad anxiety and depression that I actually was in therapy before this happened. And then you add this to the mix and it's just like,
Yeah.
So for somebody like me that just lost my mother and has anxiety and depression, like this is not something that I needed this year. I did not need this. So I try to that's why I'm laughing, even though I probably, sound crazy that I'm laughing about it because it's really not funny. But I guess that's how I'm dealing with it sometimes. I totally struggle with it. I have my moments where I'm just like still in disbelief and still can't believe, I've even, there's been times, and this might make me sound horrible, but as welcoming as my family has been to me, and I'm very grateful for it, there's been brief times where I think to myself, I got to run away because this is too much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only for a brief second. It's not anything I dwell on. It's not something I think about a lot, but I think it's just a coping thing for me because I just sometimes don't want to deal with it. But then I think, oh my gosh, am I going to fit in with them? I feel I'm finding myself being very insecure all of a sudden. Like, oh my gosh, I have to be on my best behavior. And do they swear? Do they, I don't know, stupid things like that, is it okay to swear around them? Cause I can tend to have a trucker mouth, and I have, I have all these tattoos and I think, are they going to judge me because of my tattoos, or are they going to judge me? I don't know, and it's probably just me being insecure and maybe they aren't like that. I don't know.
Same. What is your hope moving forward for your relationship with your family that you grew up with and then your newfound family?
I hope to be able to tell my one brother someday and have him be okay with it and not have it change anything. And as far as my new family, I guess in my mind, I think I'm not going to push myself on them, but I'm going to go with whatever, you know what I mean? And if something comes of it, great. If it doesn't, I want to sit here and say that's fine too. I don't know how I'll feel because part of me is I wonder if there's any family that doesn't want to meet me, and because I can be a sensitive, and I think, is it going to hurt me if they eventually stop talking to me? It's just stupid things like that. In my mind, I think too much. I analyze everything.
Yeah.
I think too much. So,
well, I don't think those are stupid thoughts, though. I think that's totally valid.
Okay. Yeah. See, you're actually the first person I've ever talked to that is in this situation, other than the stories I see on that Facebook group.
Mm.
So it's nice to hear, get some validation that what I'm feeling is not abnormal.
Not at all. So many things that you've said. I'm like, same. Yeah.
I mean, my therapist will tell me that too. But then again, he's not in this situation. He's just telling me from a, professional standpoint,
Right. What advice would you give to a parent who may be keeping a DNA surprise from their child?
Oh, I would definitely tell them to tell their child because I see what it's doing to me. But then again, I see what it's done to other people on this Facebook group. I don't know. I personally would say you need to tell your child. It's their right, first of all, for medical reasons, because my situation, my dad actually died from lung cancer. He was only in his 60s. And come to find out, 3 of his siblings also died from lung cancer. And I'm an ex-smoker. I quit smoking 4 years ago. So I've smoked, that's pretty big information.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So if anything, it's very important, I think, for medical reasons, especially, and it come to find out, like I said, finding out my biological side there, that's a pretty big deal. But I guess too, it all depends on the person, on how they're going to handle it or not, and everybody's different. Everybody handles things differently. So I don't, but yeah, that's what I would say.
And I know you're still relatively new in this journey, but what advice would you give to someone who just found out that they are an NPE?
Oh God. Yeah. Honestly, I have no advice yet.
That's fair.
I think for me, I'm still processing it. It's been, for me personally, it's been, even though my family has been very, welcoming, well, the 3 people I've met, it's still hard to process. I really don't have, I guess I would say to somebody to obviously seek therapy. I think that's important. And to talk about it, don't keep it in, and maybe reach out. One of the first things I did was to see if there was a Facebook group. And I don't really interact much in there. Sometimes I will, but I don't interact very much. But just reading other people's stories and knowing that I'm not alone helps. Because there's a lot of people out there that are in the same boat as me and you. A lot. I am so amazed at how many people are. So that really helps. Yeah, I think it's still too soon for me to give anybody any.
Well, I think that's great advice. So thank you. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your journey. I wish you the best of luck as you continue to process this. And I hope that it gets easier and that you find some peace and, maybe even somehow get some answers that you're looking for.
Well, you too. And I thank you very much for reaching out. And I think this is awesome that you're doing this, because I think with this DNA, it's going to be a common occurrence for hundreds, if not thousands of people, from now on.
Thanks again to Kristin for sharing her story. If you have a DNA surprise that you'd like to share, please email dnasurprises@gmail.com. And if you haven't yet, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Until next time.